Hi, I'm Marianne Sprague-Dennison, the Executive Director of Active Discovery. Our mission statement is to foster activity, encourage learning, and launch discovery despite tough circumstances. We want to welcome you to another video in our series of Hometown Heroes. We're excited for you to meet a good friend of mine, Ian Forber-Pratt. I've known Ian from an early point in his journey. This video will show his remarkable path from being kicked out of college and struggling with substance abuse to becoming an internationally recognized thought leader and policymaker in the way children are cared for and protected around the world.
My name is Ian Forber-Pratt, and I wear a number of hats. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of an organization called CERI, Children's Emergency Relief International. I'm a husband and a father. I've got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old child. I'm a Sunday school teacher as well, and I'm a trustee at a school called Principia in St. Louis, Missouri. Kind of the trajectory of my life that has been benchmarks or things that I've been able to overcome in life kind of started with my adoption story and the idea of just identity and belonging and how do I fit into a world. And I was kind of just assaulted with all these differences, and I've been able to kind of resolve those within myself and deal with them. Then after that, I just fell into alcoholism and kind of extreme living in many different ways. After getting sober from that, then I dealt with this idea of attacks against the work that I was doing. As I was doing social work and changing systems from big orphanages to family-based care, I had all of those aspects to deal with, of that fear of just being attacked and being at risk. And then after that, I had a marriage that I entered into, my wife and I, that was different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, and we struggled hard through the first many years of marriage. And so all of those have been things that I have been grateful to overcome, and they all are part of my story. I was born in Calcutta, India, and adopted to America, and started out in Washington State in the US, and then grew up outside of Boston. Talking about my adoption journey is not necessarily about me, getting excited about telling you about my adoption journey. It's more about how can I connect with anybody in the world who has felt like they're from somewhere else and they're living in a situation that maybe they didn't plan. And so I was adopted in 1980 from India and was adopted to America to two white parents. My mother's from Canada and my father's from the US. And they adopted me as their first child. So I came along first, and then 4 years later, they adopted my sister, who came over. She was over for 3 months and then became disabled. She had a spinal cord disease called transverse myelitis. And then my parents had 2 biological children afterwards. So another 2 years apart and 4 years apart. So we've got a 10-year spread of us kids. And we have disability in our household. We have multiple races in our household. And we grew up in kind of white suburban America. For me, everybody always knew that I was adopted because my mom was white and my dad was white. So the questions started coming as soon as kids could talk. I constantly thought about just kind of belonging and why was I not with my original family? And then after 4 years old, my sister was along. She used a wheelchair. So it was kind of a lot of questions, especially growing up in the 80s and the 90s in America. And so a lot of that kind of caused me to be like, okay, these things I don't understand, but I don't necessarily want to engage in the conversation. And so a lot of the barriers to my own choice, I put up myself. And I think then they were reinforced by society. During my adoption journey, I got progressively kind of more confused. So when I hit kind of teenage years, 13, 14, 15, where any human being is thinking about their identity and who they are and how they show up in the world, I had this additional layer of being a brown child in a majority white area and not even truly understanding how adoption showed up. And my parents did a great job at exposing us to Indian culture. They did a lot of wonderful things. They were always ready to talk about adoption within our family, so it wasn't like a hidden concept, and I still struggled with it. I had what I would say is kind of a traumatic experience, where at the college that I was going to, a good friend of mine fell off these like beautiful limestone bluffs and died a number of hours later. And that for me was a really traumatic experience. And the reason that I bring that up is that I would suspect that many people that are watching this have had some sort of traumatic experience in their lives. And a lot of times it's something that maybe they feel they can manage, or maybe it's something that they felt that they've kind of kicked in some coping mechanisms. Maybe they've kicked in some habits, either positive or negative, to deal with whatever that thing is. And so for me, the culmination of thinking of myself as an adoptee and my identity and all of these kind of racial questions, as well as this kind of catalyst of this good friend of mine falling and dying, threw me into this kind of alcoholic drinking. And for a long time, I was able to kind of not think about it, because I would call it functional alcoholism, where I would drink every day and I would think about it. Like I would plan how I was going to get my next drink. So it was like very intentional. But I was functioning. I was working or studying in school and all those different things. And so I actually had to leave that college halfway through my senior year for doing everything that you're not allowed to do at college. So I went to a fairly conservative Christian college, and I was smoking and drinking and everything you can possibly think of. And it all came to this culmination where I had always told myself, if I was ever too hungover to function, if I woke up in the morning and I just couldn't do it, then it was a problem. And I don't know why that was my make or break it for myself, but that was what was clear to me. And I suspect that people watching this, deep inside you, you might have your kind of make or break it. You might think about, oh my gosh, like this is a problem when? And so for me, I woke up one morning, it was actually February 6th of 2006. I woke up and I said, you know what? This is it. Like I cannot keep drinking. I was too hungover to function. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to work. And that for me was the moment. And so I call that my still small voice moment, because that idea of good, that idea that I could do more, the idea that I could serve others, just kind of came in at that right moment. And that day, I quit all drinking, all smoking, and haven't looked back ever since. And it hasn't been easy, but that was just the right thing. And then I dedicated my life to this trifecta of faith, service, and activity. They've allowed me to kind of carry on that sobriety moving forward. So for my entire growing up, I knew I was from India, but I couldn't really connect what it meant to be Indian. And I didn't realize it till probably 10 years ago. But that kind of dissonance was something that was kind of alive inside of me, and I never knew how to verbalize it or how to think about it. And I would suspect that there are a lot of people out there that have that kind of tug of war or some sort of dissonance inside of them, that they don't necessarily have the vocabulary or really even the time to think about and put that vocabulary to those emotions. My first time back to India was when I was 26 years old. We had a family friend who had opened a small group home for young women that were disabled in India. And so my sister and I, through the help of my parents and others, got the opportunity to go and see India the first time there, and also serve at the same time, to get outside of ourselves. And I'll tell you, that was the most freeing thing for me, is that when I went back to India, it was in the name of serving and supporting good work that was going on. So while I was there, they were building a second story onto that home, and I had cement on my head and would carry and make cement, and my sister Anjali, who uses a wheelchair, was in the house helping to arrange everything. So we did physical labor of supporting, And then we did kind of helping that group home owner feel like she was not alone. And that kind of helped me be a little bit less personal about it. It allowed me to go and say, I'm going to look for my roots. I'm going to understand where I come from, but at the same time, I'm going to help others and I'm going to serve others. And the minute that my foot hit the ground on Indian soil, I felt at home and not at home in the same instant. It was super confusing. And then that first night, we were in the city of Kolkata, or Calcutta in India. The first night, it was just my sister and I. We didn't know a whole lot about India. And we were in a hotel room, and there were political elections going on. So there were people screaming in Bengali and megaphones. And it scared me to my core, because I didn't know what they were saying. I wasn't used to kind of like this kind of aggressive type of political tone and all those things. That scared me to my core. And what I found then is that as my sister and I were sitting in that hotel room, just kind of like, where are we? What's going on? The idea that we were there to serve others and support others was something that we could like grasp onto when everything else felt chaotic. And that was the first time that I went back. And since then, my relationship with India, and therefore my relationship with what I kind of see as my kind of origins in life, has just grown exponentially. It's been incredible. But that first uncomfortable time was still the foundational seed sowing moment for me. After 2006, when I got sober, I went back to the college to finish 2 more trimesters. It went in 3 semesters. And to finish those. And at that point, a number of people said to me, Ian, you should take a look at social work. My second connection to India was on and abroad from that college in 2007. So I finished up my college career back now on my own terms, giving back to an institution that had given me so much in India on and abroad. And while I was on that India study abroad, I followed people's advice and I decided, you know what? I'm going to go and do my master's in social work. I did a Google search for schools that had social work master's degrees, and Washington University at that time, it's called the Brown School of Social Work, had the top social work degree in the country. And so I applied only to there. I didn't have the grades, I didn't have the finances, but I knew it was the right thing because I felt like I had been through so much and that I was on this track of service and good, and so I applied to it. Now I had a very little amount of money in my bank account left, and I moved to close to Washington University into an apartment. I started working in an elementary school, and I just waited till I was accepted. Now, the percentage chances of me actually getting accepted were very low, but I was accepted eventually and started doing that work, and I haven't looked back ever since. There are a lot of fundamental things that have kind of helped me move through this journey in life and feel like I'm kind of contributing. It's 3 of kind of the fundamental elements is the idea of a power greater than myself, and I call it faith. For me, it's a relationship with just this entity, this idea of good in the world. And so faith is a really big part of my life. The second big part of my life is just service. And it goes along with the first. The idea of just being outside of myself and being aligned with good in the universe. And so we've got faith, we've got service, just being outside of myself. And then the third is just kind of being active. So for me, even if I had that service-oriented aspect, that faith-oriented aspect of things, I just get within my own bubble and kind of just in the routine of everything. And the more that I'm able to be physically active, whatever it looks like, whether it's with my kids, kind of biking along somewhere, whether it's going for a run, I run at least 3 times a week. And it's not like I'm doing, massive, like fastest in the world running. It's being active. I use the hashtag #InMotion after all of my social media posts when I'm running or doing things. Because I find that motion helps to fuel my creativity, helps to fuel my relationship with self, helps me to think more about service, and helps me think more about faith. The idea of service sometimes feels like this kind of privileged thing. Like, gosh, there's so much chaos going on, there's so much noise, I'm just struggling to take care of myself. Why would I serve others? And I would actually argue that you deserve to be able to serve others. I believe that it's part of the way that we were made as human beings is to look outside of ourselves and do good somehow, some way. And it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be something hugely overt. I gave my week to go and serve in this place. It's more that idea of, I believe we are truly stronger when we are able to think outside of ourselves and think about how can I be part of someone else's good. And that can even be a prayer, a good thought for somebody, a good word. But the more I've found, and this is based on personal experience, but it's also based on lots of research that we see these days about just social science and about the idea that as human beings, we are interdependent, relationship-based beings. And so that idea then, if you are not a lone island, if you are fundamentally an interdependent being, which is what social science is showing these days, then if you are doing only things within yourself, that interdependence ends up being kind of one way and often can be draining. But if you are not only taking care of yourself and caring about self-care and your own strength, but you're also serving and thinking about the other around you, it actually allows entire communities to thrive.
My name is Mariana, and I am originally from Colombia. And my relationship with Ian is I met him at school, so I was close friends with Ian's sister-in-law, Chini. Chini and I attended the same high school, so we became close friends, and I would visit her sometimes at her home, and I spent New Year's Eve with them one time. That's how I first met their family, and then I was in Sunday school with Ian as my Sunday school teacher. I think initially my main motivation to stay in touch was Chini, to be completely honest. I still saw Ian in Sunday school all the time, even during quarantine and COVID. I would attend virtual Sunday school with him, and we would have some great conversations that encouraged me to stay in that class and to see him as a mentor. And I think he would agree with the fact that it eventually became more of a mentorship. Some of the ways that Ian has impacted me and my life, it's leading by example. I think I can always look at him and know that he is balancing his life and the way he prioritizes things, and he makes sure he creates the space for things that matter to him and that are important for his work. It's one of the most inspiring things for me that I can learn from, and I know I can look at him for that example. And the second one would be just continue to make an effort to support me no matter how much I maybe sometimes try to push it away. It's just like a natural response. I don't feel like I need anybody, but at the end of the day, every time I reach out for his support or anybody else that is in my life willing to help me, I realize that there are other ways to see the world, that there are other doors that could be opened. And I think that's extremely valuable.
I've had so many people in the different country offices that I work with, and people throughout the US, including my old self, say, but life is tough and I just don't have time to give to somebody else. And what I argue is that I understand, and I think you should really appreciate that life is tough. You deserve to feel, gosh, this is unfair right now. But one of the things of breaking that cycle is serving others. One of the things of breaking that just me and this is horrible, is just getting outside of yourself. It's almost kind of like tricking yourself. I know that sounds a little weird, but it's just like when I'm in misery, when I'm just like focused on, this is so tough. You know, maybe our 1-year-old has been up all night and I wake up in the morning and I'm like, this is just so tough. But then maybe I have to wake up that morning and I need to drive somebody in my community to a health appointment. or I need to do something for somebody else, I guarantee you that I'm lifted by doing that. My physical activity in life has kind of gone in chapters, kind of as life has. And I think that's really important for anyone that's viewing this. It's okay if you're not in the greatest chapter of life. You know, life will inevitably come in some of those chapters, but where are some of the things that are kind of like helping you be buoyant, helping you feel like you are able to move forward to the next day? And so physical activity is definitely one of those that I found when I'm physically active, I'm feeling more buoyant, but it certainly hasn't been that way. So when I was young, I was physically active and I played soccer and things like that. And then for a chapter of my life, I really got into drinking and smoking cigarettes and just kind of a lot of kind of this party type of lifestyle. And I was pretty physically stagnant. I would bike every now and again and do things like that, but it wasn't kind of an ethos. It wasn't kind of a lightning rod in my life. And I got really kind of physically heavy for many years. And then as I got sober, when I quit my drinking and my smoking, and I decided that I wanted to live a life a little bit more of service, a little more outward facing, I started becoming active. I started being around other people who were active because that was a big thing for me. And that kind of allowed me to kind of just be in motion. But I was not a runner. And so only 3 years ago, I started running, and I can't even tell you why. Like, it was just one of those chapters of life where it just felt like the right thing to do. And I started running by myself. I've still never done an organized race. So I don't like do that type of thing. For me, the action and the motion is just on my own terms so I can center myself. It's my own therapy right now. And so right now I run very actively now, 3 times a day. I'm training for an ultra marathon, and I would have never, ever guessed that I would do any of that. Like, it's ridiculous. But they allow me to get in the headphones or to be quiet and just be by myself with my thoughts. And really, it's a processing activity for me. I'm able to be physically active, in motion, and I'm able to process and pray. I plan my best Sunday school classes when I'm running. I plan my best strategic activities in the foster care field and in the child protection field while I'm running or cycling. It just is a space to reflect. So whether it was team sports or individual sports like running and cycling has directly impacted the way that I feel right now, the way I've overcome obstacles. So doing team sports allowed me to understand how to work with a team, how to make the peace sometimes, how to compromise on things and everything in between. And then running and cycling has helped me understand that there are going to be times where there's a painful moment or there are conditions that you didn't expect, and how to continue to be joyous or to persevere within those circumstances that are way out of your control. The other amazing part about cycling is that I pick up the kids from school with like a mountain bike trailer, and that is some of the most precious time where I'll pick up Zane from school. He'll be in kind of his 5-point harness in the trailer, and he'll just tell me about his day as we bike home. And it is just amazing. We're kind of like parallelly being in motion, and he's able to pedal as well, and it's just an incredible experience.
We have some kind of trailer, and down the hills, the trailer actually, I could pedal and get us faster down the hill.
I think fundamentally important for kids, no matter what it looks like, is physical activity. You know, you don't need fancy sporting equipment, but kids that are kicking a tire down the road, or my wife grew up with having 5 pebbles and you throw them up in the air and see how many you can pick up, and they would just be active and outside and playing. And I believe it's fundamental for a child's upbringing to be active and participatory in just being part of the world. The other thing is I believe that being stagnant leads towards negative emotions and negative coping mechanisms. So just the idea of being in motion is so powerful for kids, because idle time, unfortunately, creates a lot of negative outcomes. I've always wanted to model for the children activity so they can see I'm not expecting them to be active by themselves, but I'm also active. But I believe that it helps them experience health in many, many different ways. Mental health, physical health, etc. And my wife and I talk to them often about the why. So Zane, for example, who's 5 and starting soccer, why do we want you to go to soccer? Because you learn with other teammates about how to work together for a goal. You learn how to be active, and when you're tired, you learn to think about, okay, how do I get another gear? How do I move forward? How do I understand that I'm tired and understand my limits? All of those things are incredible in activity.
From everything Ian has shared with us so far, it's obvious that there are 3 pillars his life has been built on: serving others, faith in a higher power, and activity. Ian tells us that service is not something that takes away from us, but actually allows us to be an active participant in creating our path in life. It's a lot like what we try to do in the active discovery kits we give the children we serve. Opportunities to try activities they might otherwise never experience. Find something they love, and it empowers them to be an active participant in creating their path in life.
Throughout life, I've had the privilege of being parts of a number of things. So like I played soccer growing up. I was able to be part of swimming and music and things like that. And the first thing I'd like to say is that I suspect that there are some people that are watching this who haven't had those opportunities to be part of different things like that. And so I realized that those were huge privileges for me. But I've realized in life that there have been a number of kind of aha moments in the things that I have been a part of that again were based on kind of the values of the thing. So me, for example, music has always been a big thing for me. And whether it's formal that I was in choir in school, or whether it's just singing to myself or tapping on something or playing on the piano, I play the piano, but absolutely not formally. I don't know how to do 2 hands at once and all that stuff, but I play just because that's part of how I can express myself. And one of my aha moments around that is that when I was being part of music that I felt was in harmony, I felt in tune with a power greater than myself that I felt that was good. And so there have been a number of those things, and activity is another big one, where when I am running and I'm just in my own world, maybe I'm listening to like loud, screamo, ridiculous music, or I'm listening to rap, or I'm listening to anything. And I just realized that I was just like in a whole nother world for a little bit. Those things are these aha moments where I actually tune in and opt into them. And I realize, gosh, like I felt in tune with the universe at that moment. But one thing that I think that can be so helpful is if more kids are helped to understand, you know what, when you're feeling at peace, when you're feeling like you're just you, when you're feeling like you can be free, that's a moment to remember. That's a moment to write down. That's a moment to draw about. That's a moment to sing about. That's a moment just to tell somebody else about it. And I think that the more that we're able to empower young people to kind of realize when those aha moments come, the more agency they're able to feel. Because in this kind of technology world, so I've been studying a lot about Generation Z and Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha is the newest generation. And the research showing that this newest generation, Generation Alpha, are the first ones that had a digital presence before they were born. So basically, they have been part of technology and immersed in it before they were born. And what that means is that many young people these days have all the information and all of those aha moments and experiences just immersing them. The question is, how do they interact with those? How do they understand in the moment when there is something of value and something that is draining? And I think the more that we can teach young people in the moment to say, yeah, that felt right. I felt in tune. I felt free. I felt me. And be able to say in that moment, I want to keep this. I want to find more of these moments. The more that then they're able to accrue those into energy and fuel for the tougher moments. in my activity, just kind of being in motion, the idea of structure has been really helpful. And I never realized exactly why until I started studying child development and just human development in general. And the idea of when young people have structure, and to be honest, when we adults have structure, some sort of consistency. And I'm not saying rigidity, it has to be rigid, but when we have something that we can count on, is so freeing for people. And it might seem like the antithesis of that. Oh my gosh, I've got this consistency and I have to do it. But actually, the more that we have kind of a rhythm in life, the more we feel in tune with something greater. And so in my activity, I'm able to kind of like feel this structure where I'm like, you know what, 3 times a week or so, I'm gonna go running. And I'm kind to myself that if that doesn't happen in 1 week, I'm not a fail. But I've got that goal. And I find that when it doesn't happen, I absolutely feel it. I can tell you, you know what, I didn't run this week. And it doesn't have to be running. It can be whatever somebody is kind of feeling connected to. But that consistency then lifts me up, and that structure allows me to feel just so confident and grateful that I'm in motion, and it gets me outside of myself. So then the kind of evil or difficulty or whatever you want to call it in the world that I believe is going to continue to assault us for much of our lives is something that then I can be like, okay, I've got this consistent thing that I believe is a connection to good. I believe activity is my connection to good in many ways. I've got this thing that I know is going to be there this week. And subconsciously, I might not like verbalize it to you in that way, but subconsciously, it just allows me to feel like I've got the fuel to keep moving forward. After I did my master's in social work, I started working in the foster care field in the US. And the idea of foster care, for anyone that's not familiar, is the idea that a young person who is not safe within their family can live with another family until it's safe for them either to go off on their own, to be adopted, or to go back with their biological family. Now, I'll be very honest, there are a lot of broken things about the foster care system in the US. And now globally, we're learning more that the best thing for children is to be with their people, to be with their biological family, those who they feel are family, in a safe and appropriate way. So I foster care case managed in the US on a program called Extreme Recruitment, which was the idea of finding family members and natural supports for older youth in foster care. And I did that for many years. But at the same time, I always knew that I wanted to give back to India. I wanted to go back and I wanted to be part of change in India. So I started doing my research from the US. I sent out 1,000 emails to people in India that were in the kind of the foster care, kind of child protection field. And I said, hi, my name is Ian. I would love to do foster care work. I've kind of Googled and found out that a foster care system doesn't exist. I'd love to learn from you. And can you guess how many emails came back from that 1,000? 2. And so it might have been very easy to give up at that point. But I said, you know what? That's 2 more than 0. And so I kept then contacting people. And I said, you know what? At some point, I'm going to move to India and I'm going to start a foster care organization. But I didn't know how to do that. So then I Google searched how to start a foster care organization. And I wrote a business plan on a napkin at Starbucks. And I started sending emails again to those 1,000. And when I sent an email again to those 1,000 people, I got 4 responses and then 6 responses. And so slowly I started, as I was foster care case managing in the US, I was building up my familiarity with this idea of foster care. And so my idea grew. You know, I said that I am going to be someone who sells everything, moves to India, and starts the first foster care only organization. And after 4 years after I wrote my business plan, I got a clear message from the universe. It's time to go. So I sold everything I had. I packed 3 bags of clothes and I moved to India with the idea of starting a foster care system. And I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. But the first day I arrived in India, I bought a motorcycle And I started moving around. I didn't know language, I didn't know culture, and I had just a little bit of money in my pocket. And I started volunteering for organizations, serving, then became a consultant, and I got funded by UNICEF to start a small organization called Foster Care India. And I realized that there were no laws in the state of Rajasthan where I was working on foster care. And so I went up to the state government and I knocked on their door and I said, "Hi, my name's Ian. I'd like to write a law on foster care." And they said, "No." And I said, "Okay, I get it. But I'm going to drink your tea and I'm going to keep proving to you that there's a need for this until you say yes." So after going back for 2 years and working in the community and learning, I did evidence-based research around what people thought about the concept of foster care. I kept going back to the state government, drinking their tea. I was playing Angry Birds on my phone while I was waiting. And I went back and back and back. And eventually, they opened up the doors and they said, "Ian, you've been annoying us for long enough. You can be part of a drafting committee to write the first foster care legislation for the state of Rajasthan." So after being on the ground and realizing that there was a great appetite for the idea of foster care, but people weren't ready to do that, I then kind of expanded our work to say, okay, how can we pilot foster care? Basically, how can we create proof of product? And so we started on the ground, now that we had a legislative framework in the state, recruiting foster families. And we ran into so many barriers. So as we moved forward with this concept of foster care, I said, you know what, we need national change. And so I went up to a descendant of Gandhi, actually. Her name's Maneka Gandhi. She was the minister of the Ministry of Women and Child Development in India. I did the same thing. I knocked on her door and I said, "Ma'am, I'd like to write a law on foster care for the country." She said, "Okay." And so I was lucky enough to be a co-chair of the drafting committee, and we wrote the first foster care guidelines in the history of India. We passed them, we ratified them the next year. And then I realized that I had been doing everything all wrong. I realized that I was creating, or part of, a whole group of people to create another siloed, removal-based, savior-based system in child protection. What I realized is that foster care was removing kids from their families, putting them in non-related families, and then still wondering where they went after 18. And I realized that what we needed to do was be part of a continuum of care that started at families and communities in children's best interest. And it was quite an identity thing for me. I'd become the foster care person in India. And I believe that I'd been pretty successful in changing legislation and thought and practice in a fairly short amount of time. We're talking about a 6-year span here. But I then had to completely re-identify what I was advocating for to being a bigger picture of how are we thinking about healing, empowerment, and strength of families and communities. Now, at the same time, something that I would say was pretty traumatic for myself and for my wife happened. So during the first 4 years of doing this work, I was lucky enough to meet my wife at a child protection conference. We had kind of an arranged/love marriage where we started dating after marriage. And we had met in this kind of child protection conference. I had fallen for her. We were different religions, different cultures, different languages. I didn't know Hindi, she didn't know English, just everything was different. And we had gotten married, and she had moved to where I was living. And unfortunately, we began getting death threats and threats against our lives and our existence from people who were running institutions, orphanages, because we are part of changing the way that children were cared and protected. And so we had to leave the town that we were living in and move up to Delhi, the capital of India, for some anonymity and some safety. And so we ended up moving overnight, leaving everything, some really tough relationships. My team felt like I had abandoned them and all those things in the middle of me changing my identity as being the foster care advocate to being the kind of advocate of a wide range of family-based care. And so it was a really, really interesting and difficult transition. And I was thinking about, right now I'm in an environment that I can't fully control, but where are the values and where are the things that I feel I can control? So what did I have to do? I was active. I was thinking about service. I was thinking about faith. When we moved up to Delhi, I was able to join an organization that I work for now, Children's Emergency Relief International, in working in India, and I started as their national director. I moved up to the director of Southeast Asia Advocacy. Then I moved up to the global director of advocacy. And now in my role as deputy executive director, we've got 5 country offices in Guatemala, in Moldova, in India, in Sri Lanka, and South Africa. And we work across the board with this theme of protecting childhood. So, I mean, I can't tell you how exciting that work is. The idea of helping families and communities and young people thrive on their own terms. And so the lasting change that I've been a part of is the idea that orphanages and large institutions are not the way to care for children and help them, their families, and their communities be empowered. What's happened for decades has been this kind of bureaucratic kind of transactionalization of children, where basically children are removed from their families and their families are actually vilified just because those families are going through some sort of natural crisis. Around the world, most often it's just poverty that children are in orphanages. And so the biggest part that I've been in India is questioning that system, that idea of removing kids from their families, putting them into an orphanage with no connection with their families, and then being curious why they don't feel part of society after 18 years old. And what a number of us have been doing is saying, gosh, how can we look at this differently? How can we see families as the ones that just need their strengths supported and identified and empowered, and communities being empowered to support those families and those children? And so that's been an incredible thing that I've been part of in India. So I'm based in the US, but I do phone conversations, Zoom conversations, et cetera, with my teams. And then I travel to each of those countries once or twice a year. So it's the most incredible, blessed work. It's amazing. There have been a number of things in my life that have planted the seed to be a social worker. I think just growing up in kind of not the norm, not the majority of culture, being Indian, being adopted, was the first seed. Was that idea that because I felt a little bit different, so to speak, which I don't think is a bad word at all, but because I felt a little different, I always wanted to give back and be a part of helping others who felt different feel loved and seen. So there was no doubt that was kind of one of the seeds. But then for me, as I worked through the discomfort of how do I show up in the world, what does it mean to be Indian, what does it mean to be adopted, what does it mean to be growing up in America, all these different things. I think the kind of connection with India gave me that second seed to be like, gosh, like I really want to work internationally in social work. And it just kind of grew from there. I did my schooling here in St. Louis and did my master's in St. Louis and did foster care case management in St. Louis, moved to India, but always knew that St. Louis was going to be home for when I parented. And I don't know why that is. There's a school here that we really appreciate. And so 4 years ago, we sold everything in India and moved back to St. Louis so that we could raise our kids here. I had no idea I would be here now. I don't know if I knew about what my future would bring, but I could have never anticipated the level at which I believe I've reached and the impact that I've been able to be a part of and the joy in parenting. It is difficult. Marriage has been difficult, and it's been the most beautiful, wonderful, I would never change it thing. And so I never could have anticipated all of that, and I'm forever grateful. We could do videos and videos on how much parenting is teaching me right now about the world in general. And so with our 5-year-old Zane, right now, just seeing him kind of lean into things or lean out of things is this incredible joy. So recently he started playing soccer. So it's this like local club. It's outside of our school universe. So it's like in the community. It's just a joy because he's meeting new people and kind of having new conversations. But to see him, he's kind of timid. And so sometimes he won't actually aggressively go for the ball. And what I've realized is that's an absolute strength as well. Just that he's active and out there and seeing how a team works, it's just the most incredible thing.
Soccer is really good, but the only thing about soccer is it's because it makes me sweat. It's an hour long.
Are you tired after you get done playing
I'm so tired. I'm like, okay, wow.
I hope that other people see in me an equity in treating people kind of equally with their value being inherent as good no matter who they are, no matter how they're showing up. I hope people see honesty in me, and I hope people see kindness. I hope that when they're around me, they feel like they're being seen and they feel like they're being lifted.
One of the most significant habits I've taken from Ian is his ability to interact with people while making them feel heard and special and unique. I think it's so easy to just talk to people in automatic and not even pay attention to them, and something that I've consistently noticed is that he makes a genuine effort to make sure the person feels special in that moment he's listening to them. The person that is talking to Ian, as soon as he demonstrates that genuine interest in listening to what they have to say, I immediately notice they have more willingness and more genuine interest in talking to him as well. So people open up, people feel safe, people start to realize that their voice matters. And I think that's extremely valuable. So having the opportunity to do that with anybody you encounter, I think it's a great opportunity. So that was my first reaction when I saw Ian having a conversation with somebody and just the other person opening up and feeling completely like they could be themselves and be vulnerable. And that is something that since I started to realize it was something he did, I started to put it more into practice, that mindfulness while listening to others. I do think Ian makes a good hometown hero. And I think so because I just genuinely believe anybody has the potential to become a hometown hero. It just requires courage, and that is something that Ian expresses in his daily interactions with people, in his way he commits to his work and to his family. That all requires courage, and I think being able to express it with so much passion, it's what makes him a good hometown hero.
Ian's story is inspiring to us because he was able to overcome a series of challenging circumstances through empowering himself. The amazing work Ian is doing proves what Active Discovery believes. Everyone's future can be much more than an extrapolation of their past.
So for any kid that does not have a parental situation that feels right to them, maybe it's a father that's not there, maybe it's a mother that doesn't treat you well, maybe it's anything, maybe your parents are going through a divorce. The message I'd love to give you is that you are loved and complete and whole. And what they are doing is not your fault. And what I've told so many young people and spent time with them is that when those things are happening, please know that they're unfair and it's not the right thing to be happening to you. But it doesn't touch who you are and how you are able to move forward successfully in this world. So what I'd love for you to do is just take a deep breath and think about that you are absolutely complete and you have everything inside of you, and it doesn't matter the drama that people are doing around you. It's not your fault. And it's important that you know that you are loved and cared about.